So, hello everyone, and great to have you online. Sorry for the delay. I just came from the Prime Minister's office talking about, believe it or not, planetary boundaries and the upcoming World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, where the whole title of the meeting is, as you may know, the new global context, and we'll have a whole series of sessions on planetary boundaries and abundance within a safe operating space. So it's quite exciting, and today is a special day. I mean, a doubly special day, given that you have managed to come to the end of this first MOOC ever performed on planetary boundaries, resilience and development. So congratulations for hanging in straight through, and hope that you felt that it's been worthwhile and creative, and that you've learned a lot. So a good job, and congratulations. The second is this remarkable timing that today is the day when we publish in Science the double update on our science, which is the fundamental basis for the entire course. The number one is the Great Acceleration research between the Resilience Center and IGBP, and secondly, the Planetary Boundary 2.0, which I've been mentioning a few times during the course, the 5-year science update on our planetary boundary research published today in Science. So we will be spending essentially the entire Hangout on these two scientific updates. I'd like to start by handing over, and then, well, you don't need any reintroductions, Lisa, but Lisa Deutsch, who's been talking to you in some of the earlier videos. Lisa happens also to be the grand architect around everything that has enabled this course to become a reality. So Lisa has been an anchor right through. And Lisa is also one of the lead authors of the Great Acceleration papers. We thought we'd start there, walk through that update, and then I'll walk through briefly the update on the Planetary Boundary paper, and then we'll open up for the Q&A in the same way as previously. So we have a lot of your questions, and we'll pick those up.
Yeah.
So Lisa, over to you.
Great, yeah, thanks. It's fun to sit on this very last day. I'm really proud of all you guys. We're looking today at how many people we have. People from 88 countries. We have a little more women than men. Just looking at all the exciting things that we've seen in this course, and it's been really fun to design it, and it's almost a little bit like, oh, it's already over. So I'm really excited that we could end on this big bang. I don't want to say this big great ending. I've been working now for 4 years with a great group of people at the IGBP and some people here at the center on updating the Great Acceleration. And the Great Acceleration, I mean, originally it matters. It is the signal that we are in the Anthropocene, and we look at the key indicators. You know, it's the social. We see now. We could see back when it was first published, the signal of the Anthropocene, that it's the social economic system driving and the Earth system responses that we see beyond natural variability. And with this update, we see, yeah, what you've said several times, it's still happening. We are still the first generation that knows we're in the driving seat and can do something about it. This data shows, yeah, we're driving this. And so this, what we've been calling this is the planetary dashboard. So these are just a set of indicators, some essential indicators. It's not meant in any way to cover absolutely everything that's important in the social system or the natural system, but we have the population, including urbanization. We have economic indicators, the GDP and foreign direct investment. We have different indicators of resource use, energy, fertilizers, dam, water, paper, and we have indicators of like the connectivity, transport, telecommunications, tourism. And so what do we see in this new, because what we've done, we've updated the figures to 2010. We wanted to do that to see, are we still experiencing the Great Acceleration? Are there some new things happening? Well, we wanted to see if we're bending the curves anywhere, if we're managing to, you know, are there any success stories? Unfortunately, right now, I see that social economic trends are still continuing. It's maybe only the construction of new dams that are slowing in any way. I see that there's no decoupling of economic growth from emissions, from, increasing energy is still giving us, for example. One Earth system success story is the same one that I talked about, I think, even in my lecture, is the one of the Montreal Protocol of ozone, of ozone depletion. That curve is being, it's a success story. That's the only one, however, I think that is showing a leveling off, showing a bending down. That is the result of intentional human action to bend the curve down. I think the other curves that do show either a slowing or a reduction are the marine fisheries one. And unfortunately, that's not a result of marine stewardship. It's a result of us reaching a ceiling to the amount of fisheries that we can fish. I think the same cases in, you see land use, domestic land areas. It's slowing because there's not much more land left to put into cultivation. Forestry may be slowing slightly. There's not as much tropical forests. So unfortunately, we don't see too many good success stories coming out of this, but that leads us into thinking. So we are in this accelerating mode. What do we need to know? And I think that's where we then move into, how do we then, if we see our human imprint, we know what we're doing, we're accelerating, how do we make sure that we're staying in some kind of safe operating space? That's kind of what I think of as the link over then into
the Planetary Boundary update. So let me then take on there. So, I mean, you followed the course, but just a very quick recap and why this makes so much sense that Lisa starts. It's the insight that we are in the Anthropocene and in the midst of the Great Acceleration, coupled with the insight that the Earth system has tipping points, coupled with the insight that the Holocene is the only stable state of the planet we know that can support contemporary societies. And it's when you throw all this in the same cup and shake it, out comes the Planetary Boundary Framework, very logically. So the Planetary Boundary Framework, as you all know, is depicted as a theoretical methodology of analyzing the Earth system processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system, and for each such process try to identify a control variable and quantify the point beyond which science indicates the risk of interactions, feedbacks, and potentially irreversible abrupt changes. Now, the first time this was published, as you know, in 2009 in Nature, it was, in all honesty, a challenge to science. It was a large group of very well-established global environmental change scientists. It was very well scientifically founded, but still, many of the quantifications proposed and even the framework was, the first time it was tested on science. And the purpose of the publication, it was even stated at the publication, was to trigger new science as to challenge the scientific peers around the world. And oh my, it did. Since the publication in 2009, it's one of the most cited pieces of research in sustainability science. There are over 62 research articles that have been published with planetary boundaries in the title. So peer-reviewed research critically analyzing either the whole concept or planetary boundary from a social, governance, ethics dimension, or critically digging into one specific area of the boundaries or exploring interactions. So of course, really 2 years back, we decided we need to do an update. And so we gathered the key scientific groups, and particularly, and this is really important, particularly we went to those research groups that had been most critical of the original analysis. And it happened to be the ecologists, critically questioning whether we actually had evidence for a planetary scale tipping point on biodiversity loss, making the very important point that we had focused only on extinction rates, but not emphasizing the functional diversity or the role of biodiversity in response diversity and functional diversity, which we've been discussing over the course. I mean, in essence, what role does biodiversity play in building resilience? A very critical analysis from the phosphorus science community in the world, saying that, you put the boundary for how much phosphorus we can allow ourselves to flow into the ocean before we risk tipping points towards big dead areas in the ocean. And the phosphorus scientists told us very convincingly in peer-reviewed research that, way before you've knocked the oceans across a tipping point due to phosphorus, you've knocked freshwater systems, way before upstream in the terrestrial freshwater systems. We invited the nitrogen community that also was, critical of our initial assessment, and there's been peer-reviewed research coming out very, elaborately going through everything from nitrous oxide to ammonium to N2 transformation into reactive forms of nitrogen and fertilizer use, and coming up with a much more refined framework for this analysis. And finally, not surprisingly, the chemical scientists in the world have been very enthused and inspired by the idea of a planetary boundary approach. They have been working along these lines for decades. The chemical, both policy but also science analysis has always been focusing on critical loads for different compounds. So all of this was put together in what has now finally been published in Science today as the update. And I'm emphasizing this just to share with you that what makes me and the Resilience Center, our co-authors, so incredibly proud today is in fact that this is almost like an IPCC assessment. It's 5 years of tremendous advancements in science that now have confirmed the 9 boundaries. So none of the 9 have been dropped, or no new boundary has been added, which is quite remarkable. We seem to have got it right from the beginning. And we've improved the quantifications in a very significant way. And as you maybe recall, in the first round, we were only able to quantify 7 of the 9. Now we improved the quantifications of these 7, but we've added a tentative quantification for aerosol loading, which we concluded based on collaboration with Professor Ramanathan at Scripps in the US, that it will not be able to have a global boundary on aerosol loading because it operates at the regional scale. So we proposed the boundary quantifications for how much loss of optical depth in terms of solar radiation that reaches the Earth's surface we can allow in the Southeast Asian monsoon system. And we have quite a lot of empirical evidence that clouding and shading off incoming solar radiation impacts the regional hydrology in that region. So that is, in short, the process and why this is so significant. And in my mind, it really is significant because it's a natural, scientific, deep and robust improvement of the first analysis, and it gives a lot of confidence for social sciences, for policy making, and for operationalization, and for not least, and I see several questions on this already, on what the planetary boundary work can contribute in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals framework. And then just a few words of what's new then in the paper before opening the floor. Well, the first thing which is new is that we already in the first analysis had a kind of a hinge that all these 9 boundaries are not really equivalent to each other. There is a bit of a hierarchy between them. If you draw the 9 boundaries and start drawing lines of how one affects the other, you'll find that 2 of them stand out, and it's the climate system, climate change, and biodiversity, which we have actually now baptized biosphere integrity to make clear it's not only the loss of species, it's the role species play in ecosystems and biomes. That these 2, in fact, are, let's call it, high order boundaries, which ultimately determine the outcome from the Earth system. And moreover, essentially all the other boundaries kind of determine the end result is how our ecosystems and how the climate looks like. So for example, the way nitrogen phosphorus flows through landscapes will determine the outcome for a rainforest, a savanna, or a coral reef system. The way the hydrological cycle operates will determine in the end how the biosphere looks like, what kind of species we have, what kind of forests we have, etc. So, many of the boundaries kind of work upstream, and the outcome becomes climate and biodiversity. So that's one distinction we've made. The second is that, and we call these core boundaries. These 2 are called core boundaries. The second is that we've improved the updates on quantifications, and what may be worth just running down the changes is on climate change, the boundary is still 350 ppm for carbon dioxide. As you may be aware, we've just reached 400. ppm for carbon dioxide, essentially right as we speak. So we are, by the way, at 450 ppm for all greenhouse gases, which is, as we all know, a danger point in terms of all analysis, in fact, regarding climate. But then the uncertainty zone has been narrowed down because we feel that there's even more empirical evidence today to suggest that we cannot push the concentration of greenhouse gases beyond 450 ppm for CO2, i.e. roughly 500 for all greenhouse gases. So we feel even more confident there and have narrowed the range. Secondly, there's much more detail on the biosphere integrity boundary, meaning the biodiversity boundary. So we've separated them and have two quantifications. One is the same as the last time, which is on extinction rate, which is simply the count of genetic diversity on Earth, and we still think that's a good proxy. It tells us nothing of the resilience in the Indian Ocean coral reef system, but it tells us something about the total treasure of genetic diversity on Earth. But then we've added another index for functional diversity called the Biosphere Intactness Index, which has been developed by Georgina Mays and Bob Scholes and other leading ecologists. And this is a measure of what functions biodiversity play, and we have a tentative quantification of that. Ozone depletion remains the same, ocean acidification remains the same. For phosphorus, we then have a twin definition, one for marine systems and one for freshwater systems, and I encourage you to have a look at that. It's quite exciting how we have now been able to quantify both of these, and the freshwater one we consider has been transgressed. Nitrogen has been perhaps the biggest advancement, where we, in the first round, don't tell anyone, but we did a slight mistake, which was that, we looked at the amount of inactive N2 we convert from the atmosphere into reactive nitrogen in fertilizers, and we looked only at fertilizers, and that led us to the conclusion that we could, at a maximum, transform in the order of 35 million tons of nitrogen per year, and we are today already transforming in the order of 150. So it was a 5-6 times lower than our current use, and a dramatic change in terms of our current use of nitrogen. The mistake was the following. The modern agricultural system in the world dominates so profoundly our way of managing the entire terrestrial biosphere. And in this modern agricultural system, even the most unsustainable systems have a lot of nitrogen fixating legumes. So in part of the crop rotations are many crops which would not have been there naturally if it had been natural ecosystems, which actually take N2 from the atmosphere and convert it to reactive nitrogen, biological fertilizer industries, if you wish. And this is so large that we were criticized for not integrating this. So now we've done that, we've coupled them together. So now we've defined the boundary as the maximum amount of inactive to reactive nitrogen in the entire human managed agricultural system. I mean, natural ecosystems also have nitrogen fixating plants, naturally. And therefore the boundary has climbed up and is today set at 60 million tons of nitrogen per year rather than the 35 in the first round. So this is a change, but it's an adaptation to this biological fixation. The land use boundary has been, you could perceive it as having been dramatically changed, but in fact it's a very minor change. We always understood the land use boundary as being how much of the natural biomes on Earth do we need to safeguard in order to maintain, carbon sinks, moisture feedback, habitat for biodiversity. But we couldn't find a control variable that was directly, specifically focused on maintaining biomes. So we took the other side of the coin, which was what's the maximum amount of allowed cropland, which is the biggest threat to the remaining biomes. And that's what we used in the first round. This was criticized by many peers, so we decided to take the bull by the horn and rather try to identify quantitatively what are the critical biomes that on land regulate the stability of the Earth system. Not surprisingly, the conclusion is it's the forest biomes, and not any forests. We found that the temperate forest, the boreal forest, and the rainforest are disproportionately important compared to open savannas, steppes, or bushlands. And for each of these regulating systems, we've proposed a quantification, for example, for rainforest, that we cannot cut back more than 15%. We need to maintain a minimum of 85% of rainforest on Earth to be able to be sure to remain in the Holocene. That's quite exciting. It will certainly provoke a lot of science and debate, but we've built this a lot on empirical research. We have Tom Lovejoy, a leading forest ecologist who spent decades exploring how much forest can you cut back in Amazonia before you see tipping points and basically abrupt changes in rainforest. And his conclusion was you reach 70%, I mean you lose 30%, and off you go in abrupt changes. So that's what we've built on. Freshwater remains the same. Aerosol loading, as I mentioned, we've brought in the Asian brown cloud. And finally, we were not able to quantify chemicals. Finally, to conclude, what we've done, which I won't go through in detail, but I really encourage you to have a look at it, is that we've downscaled those boundaries which we feel are relevant to downscale. So there's a planetary boundary for water, for land, for phosphorus, for nitrogen, but there's also a regional boundary for each one of these. So for example, for freshwater, we have maintained the maximum amount of consumptive freshwater use at the planetary scale, 4,000 cubic kilometers of freshwater per year. We're today at 2,600. But we've also calculated by applying the LPJ model at the Potsdam Institute specifically for this analysis to calculate for every river basin in the world what's the minimum amount of environmental water flow we need to maintain in every river in the world on Earth to avoid critical thresholds in the ecosystems in those basins. And then we've added all that up and given a boundary position for river basins, which means that you can actually today take the planetary boundary analysis and apply it in a river basin organization or a nation or a region, which is quite exciting. And that's in a nutshell where the paper is, and it's out there, and I hope you have access to it. And if you don't have, we should help you get access to it. And we look forward to a good discussion on this.
That makes me want to add a little bit more about just a little bit more of it, because I didn't actually bring in. I forgot another thing that we actually worked on to update. But one thing I just wanted to. So because you guys might have seen in the forum, I put a link to the great Globaya graphs that we have. So you can see all of our graphs, and you can actually, our paper, the Anthropocene, the Great Acceleration paper is actually open source. So that's already out. So look in the forum for my entry, and you can see all the links to that, and you'll see there. So you might see a lot of the things that Johan talks about that they've updated. Remember that the paper that we did is a time series from 1750 to 2010. So one of the major challenges that we had to do the Great Acceleration stuff was to get this much data, to have such a well-filled, planetary dashboard with so many different indicators that went all the way back to 1750. And so you might see that some of these, the indicators that we haven't been able to update them to be the best possible indicators because there's no data that far back, because the purpose was just a little bit different. But another thing that we did that I didn't even mention, I didn't think about, which is kind of the next level of, is we also analyzed, you'll see in this time for the first time, the socioeconomic variables. We analyzed them from the point of view of different economic groups. We've separated out to see what the Great Acceleration means for different economic. In other words, the idea of not just a safe operating space, but a safe and just operating space. Where is growth happening? So for the OECD, with 18% of the population, they're still dominating with 3/4 of GDP. But we can see where actually the growth in, for example, fertilizer use is happening in the BRIC countries, in the emerging economies. We can see most of the water use is now happening in developing or the rest of the world and then in the BRIC economies, but we can still see paper production that's happening in the developing. So we can see now the difference of where things are happening, and we can see that basically the rich countries are still dominating in economic terms, but there are some places where the actual growth is actually in the last 10 years. This update is actually taking place so just wanted to bring that up now, and maybe if we and let you know that about the paper as well.
Good. So let's start addressing questions, and we have two questions that I'd like to put together. And the first one is from Joseph Batak. Sorry if I don't pronounce your surname correctly. How is the Planetary Boundaries going to be useful for the agreement on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be decided upon this year in September in the General Assembly? And the COP21, the climate summit in Paris. That's one question. The second one is from Dragos Talvescu. 2015, the year of sustainable development, I can't agree more, will be extremely important to set and anchor key SDGs with as many stakeholders as possible, preferably quantified and measurable. Yes. How can we, the participants in this class, best contribute to this effort? So let me just share with you then that, you know, the timing of publishing these two papers is really a true coincidence with regard to the end of the course, but it's certainly not a coincidence with regard to these two questions. We were able to publish the science paper today because next week is the World Economic Forum in Davos. So science recognized the enormous value of getting this planetary boundary analysis, which is a quantification of sustainable development goals, to provide a safe operating space for all the development aspirations that are included in the SDGs, right into the top level decision making next week. And we will continue throughout the whole of the spring of 2015 to help the UN in particularly quantifying targets and indicators. So as you may be aware, the goals are, you know, it's wrong to say a lost cause. I mean, either they will stay as they are, or they will be bundled together slightly, but it's not, and it's a political debate right now. But there's a lot of room for science, for experts, for yourselves, to work with your constituencies, your government representatives, your delegations at the Ministries of Foreign Affairs in the countries where you come from. So I mentioned I just came from the Prime Minister's office. It was exactly on this issue to give, you know, scientific knowledge-based ammunition for quantifications of targets and indicators. We'd like to see and secure a planetary boundary on climate, which should be at least 2 degrees Celsius. The planetary boundary analysis suggests 1.5 degrees, as you know, but also on biodiversity, on fresh water, and so on. So that is going to play out over the next 6 months. There's a lot of room for that to happen. And I would encourage you to walk over with these two papers, the Anthropocene paper, Great Acceleration paper, the Planetary Boundaries papers, and hand them over, send them over to the heads of your delegations working in the UN or at your Ministries for Foreign Affairs, or wherever you're organized in government. Will this have influence? Well, I foresee it can have influence because, you know, very important actors in the world today fully endorse the Planetary Boundary Framework. You have the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. You have the Sustainable Development Solutions Network of the United Nations, which is the support network running this course, but also influencing and being in direct dialogue with the General Assembly and the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Ban Ki-moon, by the way, is personally very supportive of a planetary boundary-based approach for world development, as is Yong Yim Kim of the World Bank. So, you know, who knows? We might see some positive outcomes during this year, thanks to the fact that, and that's why I emphasize that so much, that this update of both the Great Acceleration and the Planetary Boundary Research gives us even more scientific, robust basis for action, and that's really good. So, yeah, what are your hopes for the World Economic Forum? I think we can take as a follow-up. Okay, yeah, Anna. Okay, 2 questions. Yeah, Anna Pollock. You're asking, McKinsey have just published a report, Can Long-Term Growth Be Saved? They talk up the need for increased productivity and make no mention of environmental impacts. With lower oil prices and slower acceleration, how do we gain political support to stay safe? And then Hannah Elvery, you're asking, what are your hopes for the World Economic Forum? What would the ideal response look like from the Planetary Boundaries team perspective? So on trying to get an integrated answer here, and I'll be happy if you can contribute here as well, Lisa. These are big, complex questions. I mean, my interpretation is, well, the low oil prices, of course, is kind of a spanner in the wheel, you could argue, because it disqualifies investments in renewable energy. It kind of prolongs the transition away from fossil energy sources. But you know, there's something interestingly positive, bizarrely enough, with the low oil prices. It proves in a very pedagogic way that the market cannot solve this alone. You know, oil prices, whether they are $120 US per barrel
What happens then? Well, what happens then is that the most dirty oil shales, tar sands become profitable. So that doesn't work. I mean, we've always said, well, a high price on carbon would be ideal. It would help us make it worthwhile to invest in solar energy. Well, it doesn't work because it just makes offshore drilling in the Arctic worthwhile, etc. And then comes a low oil price, which is great because it keeps BP away from the Arctic. But on the other hand, it actually just raises consumption and solar goes havoc and things go wrong. So in a way, I think any serious policymaker or any big business leader starts to understand, from trial and error, that the market cannot do it alone. And therefore, what's the solution? Well, you then need a planetary boundary type approach to dealing with climate change. Not that you disqualify the market. On the contrary, you set a boundary, you set the guardrail, you therefore legally bind the world to a certain degree target, you translate that to a finite carbon budget, you share that in a fair way among all nations in the world, and off you go, just like Germany is doing today. It's so important to remember. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says, we're staying on our boundary track. We're going to be fossil fuel free by 2050, which means that they are in a safe operating space. We'll reduce by 40% until 2020 compared to 1990, which is remarkable. It's a transformation. We'll do it without nuclear, and it translates to a carbon budget of 22 million tons of CO2 reductions to 2020. And then she gathers her heads of all the energy utilities and says, here you are. This is your budget. Off you go. And this is your task. And that to me is operating within a safe operating space in kind of a real term way. And I think what's happening is that when countries like Germany, when actors in big industry start showing the understanding of this change, may mean that the low oil prices, in fact, does not influence so badly as it otherwise is perceived to do. It's, I know, a bit of an optimistic diagnostic of something which actually, on the short term at least, leads us in the wrong direction. But I do sense, a very significant nervousness among political leaders and business leaders. Not this great excitement over low oil prices, but rather a nervousness. And well, talk to Putin and you'll hear some real nervousness. But what's your take on this, Lisa?
Well, I mean, what would I see an ideal? Yeah, it would be a serious commitment to stay in this safe operating space. Serious commitments, numbers, and commitments to. I mean, I was talking about the Economic Forum, and then I mean, the McKinsey report is incomplete if it doesn't have the environment in it. I mean, it can't be complete without that. So.
So Carla. Okay, yes, Brekelund first. Yes, I read Elie Sedal's critique of the Planetary Boundaries and Stefan's response with interest. What is most important to remember when defending the PB framework? So I've also read Earl Ellis. I should start by saying that Earl Ellis, Linus Blomqvist, Ruth de Vries, these are respected peers. We know them. Some of them actually as friends. So I'm a bit surprised that they go on and on. I mean, they did this also 2009. They did it 2012 when we had the Earth Summit, and they do it again now. And in fact, there's nothing new in their response. It's the same kind of misinterpretation, the same kind of misunderstanding as we've had before. And despite the fact that we kind of walk them through our explanations, they still come back. And I sense more that it's just a some academics just want to have a debate, and they seem to like taking the stance that planetary boundaries is not something that is functional. But to your question, yes, but what's the most important to remember? Number one, the kind of core critique that it starts off with is there's not enough scientific evidence of Earth system tipping points. That's always where it starts. This assumption that it seems like we can go on in an unsustainable fashion, and the Earth system seems to be so forgiving and so robust, in essence resilient, that things change linearly and incrementally, and we don't have enough. It's too indicative so far whether we actually have abrupt, irreversible changes in feedbacks that could lead us permanently away from the Holocene stability. And that is a scientific debate to be held. But I would argue with very strong emphasis that it weighs very, very strong in favor of the evidence that there are tipping points to be concerned with. And the Resilience Alliance, the work by Terry Hughes et al. Is a paper that actually responds directly to the Brooks et al. Paper that Ellis makes a reference to. We'll be posting that in an hour or two if it's not been done simultaneously with this chat. So that's one critique, which I would say, you know, when they say no, there's no evidence of tipping points, your answer is yes, there is. The second misunderstanding is that they say, well, but there's no evidence of planetary scale tipping points in the biosphere. And then the answer is, well, we've never said that there has to be. In fact, even though land, water, biodiversity do not have a lot of empirical evidence, there's some evidence on planetary scale tipping points, but not a lot, so they're right. That does not disqualify these of being planetary boundaries, because they are planetary boundaries for the simple reason that they are, as we've always said, they work under the hood of the big system, climate, and regulate the ability of the climate to stay stable. And as you know, the most pedagogic answer to any critique is that the world emits 9 billion tons of carbon every year from fossil burning. Of those 9, only 4.5 stay in the atmosphere. The other 4.5 are sunk into oceans and land, which is exactly why we need ecosystems. Now, on land, where is that sunk in? Is it on agricultural land? No. It's in natural ecosystems. It's in the forest systems, the grasslands, the wetlands, the bushlands, the natural ecosystems. Agriculture is actually the single largest source of emissions. So the great paradox is that we've transformed 40% of the land area, which is the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases, while the terrestrial ecosystems remain so resilient, they continue to absorb carbon at a scale which is halving the impact on global warming, which is the most remarkable, probably the largest free ecosystem service to the world economy. To me, that's the ultimate proof that land is a planetary boundary regulating the climate system. And to just put the nail in that coffin, if you look 50 years back, 1950, that carbon sink was in the order of 1 gigaton of carbon per year, sucked up in terrestrial biomes. Today it's 2.5. So then the question is, what on earth is happening as we've gone through in the course? Well, what's happening is that humans disturb the energy system, causing an energy imbalance, causing a concentration gradient of carbon dioxide, and the biosphere, through its resilience, reacts through its biogeochemical processes to increase its sequestration of carbon. Why? Because it's applying its processes to remain stable in the Holocene. So this is, you know, a proof why that's a misinterpretation. The third one is a very silly, and Will answers to that very, very well. That, you know, well, you know, we had species before the Holocene. And species have evolved in the world throughout the whole Pleistocene. Of course that's true. I mean, nobody's questioning that whatsoever. In fact, we've been modern humans on Earth for 200,000 years. The whole point is that the Holocene is the only state we know that has enabled us to exploit the favorable environmental conditions on Earth. So it's not until the Holocene that we're able to exploit the systems on Earth, thanks to the invention of agriculture. We couldn't do agriculture outside the Holocene, but we could become sedentary farmers in the Holocene and therefore differentiate into modern contemporary societies. So that is simply a kind of an intellectual, theoretical mumbo-jumbo discussion. It's complete nonsense because we all agree. I mean, I agree with Earl, with Linus, with Ruth. We're in total agreement here. It's just that they try to create this sense of it being some kind of disagreement, which is simply just not there. Everyone agrees we had species many million years back. Everyone agrees that the hydrological cycle was not the same in the Quaternary compared to the Holocene. The final and most irritating part of the critique is that they choose to make politics of our natural science analysis. And that is so unnecessary. So they say like this, well, but you know, this paper is not interesting or not scientifically well founded, because it means that we're suggesting that a few experts would, I mean, in their word, exactly in their words, rule humanity. A planetary authority to rule humanity. That's their words in the response today. Well, nobody has suggested that. It's their, you know, it's their kind of nightmarish projection of what this is. The planetary boundary analysis is a pure natural scientific advancements in Earth system science, trying simply to ask the question, what are the Earth system processes that regulates the Holocene stability and translates that into a safe operating space. Then how on earth we live together within that space is a completely different question. It's a very profound social science question, and then Victor Galas has gone through the science there. But you know, this paper does not include one comma on the issue of global governance, and there's absolutely no normative statement nor even an objective statement regarding what the alternatives are. In fact, on the contrary, if you ask me, and I hope you felt throughout this course, we totally endorse the need to work across scales from local to global scale, and so there's no either or. And then Lisa reminds me, why don't you take the fertilizer question? You know it better than I do.
I do. No, no. I was just surprised that somehow they managed to, from the analysis, jump to the conclusion that we should reduce fertilizer everywhere, and it should be and particularly they mentioned that for some that they got out of it that you said, but then that we shouldn't. I mean that's so far from the truth. I mean you see from the analysis, you see that you're saying that you should reduce in maybe high use areas like in the US or Brazil and China, and take to the low use areas, and that would be a perfect way to have a total win-win. I mean, you could both have production in Africa. I mean, that's a place where there's hardly any phosphorus being used, maybe a little bit down in the south in southern Africa, but that's where you could definitely use it, and you could take it away from the areas where it's close to the coast, or the intense areas where it would be leaking into and showing eutrophication. So that it's just wrong. That it was nowhere was it stated that was the case, and that's
and as we have been
very unfortunate. I mean,
it is, and so unnecessary. And,
yes.
and you know, as we have been emphasizing in this course, and which Kate Raworth brought up in the chat with you guys, that you know this critique of the planetary boundary work, that you know defining absolute budgets of phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon somehow undermines poor people's access to resources, always comes from the rich people in the world. And it always comes from political voices also that represent the richest nations in the world. But because what Kate points out is that it's completely reversed. If you set a safe operating space, and if you define a global finite, you know, maximum bag of phosphorus that is available for all 7.2 billion people on Earth, then of course it becomes utterly clear that that has to be shared in a fair way. So that's why many of the rich political actors are dead nervous of setting planetary boundaries, because then it becomes so apparent that they're living way beyond their means. So the US negative reaction against the planetary boundaries at the Earth Summit in Rio was exactly this. They did not want this analysis to be on the table, because then it became so visible that the US must actually share and reduce much faster than, for example, Ethiopia, Chad, or Bangladesh. So it's a paradox that this paradigm is criticized for being unethical, when it in fact is such a profound advancement in a much more ethical approach to solidarity among rich and poor communities in the world, and particularly on nutrients. That's why it makes you almost angry when that critique comes, because it tells you simply that Africa must increase fertilizer use. Absolutely. And US must reduce, as Sweden, by the way. So, you know, it's a question of redistributing within a budget. So that's another one of these. So this critique is kind of a lot of hot air to create a sense that there's not a scientific consensus, where in fact there's so far no critique that has any real substance. Or I would qualify that slightly. The discussion, which I think is really interesting, is to continue probing interactions, feedbacks, and the occurrence of thresholds. I mean, there are uncertainties here. We have made that very clear by having a zone of uncertainty in every boundary. So, of course, there's enormous amount of research we need to continue doing to understand the width of that uncertainty. It makes a hell of a lot of difference whether the thresholds is at 350 ppm or 450 ppm. You know, it's a big difference. So that, I think, is a correct criticism even by Earl and his colleagues. Good. Carla Sbert, have you identified any encouraging interest in the US on the PB, on the Planetary Boundaries? Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the strongest spokespersons today on adopting, you know, development or abundance within Planetary Boundaries is Professor Jeff Sachs at the Earth Institute. So you have people like Jeff, heavyweight academics from Harvard to Stanford and Berkeley, strongly supporting this as a paradigm for global sustainable development. So that's one category. We have representatives from, you know, heavyweight philanthropy, from the Gates Foundation to the Rockefeller Foundation, you know, actors with whom we work with who have quite a lot of influence on the big stage on development, that see a very strong, you know, necessity of understanding a planetary boundary type approach for development. I must admit that we haven't stood in Congress presenting this, so we don't know yet. But we've had several interactions with Andrew Steer and his great institute, the World Resources Institute, and had dialogues at the political level also in the US. And you know, there are very many good political thinkers in the US that actually see the value of this. But of course, I think it's hinted between the lines here that the US remains a country that where you have the most strong, let's say, opposition as well, you could argue.
I think that one's for me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Abelardo Brenes asked, he says that he's in the Ministry of Education in Costa Rica and working with the National Strategy on Education and would like to work more with us, maybe would like to have some advice. That makes me really excited. We've been starting to get a lot of requests now and responses about the MOOC and about the material in the MOOC. And we're talking about now how we can collaborate and get this out there. And the MOOC has been, I think, really successful and really just opened some doors for us. So particularly, me gustaría hablar contigo. So please feel free to contact me directly you can see on our homepage I don't know if my contact information is on this, but if you look on the Stockholm Resilience Center's homepage, you'll find me. Please feel free to contact us. We're going to definitely try to find some ways. We'll be giving this course again, because I mean, the whole idea of this platform, this sdsn.edu, is to have these kind of courses available for anybody to use anywhere, and to build on them in the way that you see works best for you, whether or not you're a practitioner, whether or not you're a university, whether or not we were just talking today about that we actually have a very big community. Maybe 20% of the people in this MOOC speak Spanish. We need to just do simple things like get transcripts done in Spanish and other languages. But we're really exploring how to get this information out, to get particularly this MOOC as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. Contact us directly so we know your interest and what it is you're interested in.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from Elke Schnabele, but I see also flipping through that one question that many of you have is how to get access to the paper.
Yeah.
Can we do something here? It's
not open access.
No, it isn't. I'm wondering. I mean,
putting together
your
maybe
85 viewers
popular
here.
Science.
But is there any way that we could just share this in an attachment with everyone who's on this chat?
Legally?
Okay, so we are discussing with Science how to deal with this, but we'll do everything we can to post it on the forum. I would though, as you point out, and encourage you bilaterally to take contact perhaps with you, and I mean, we can allow ourselves to share bilaterally among colleagues. I mean, that is allowed. So it's just that you're not allowed to share it. I don't know what the threshold is, in fact. But it is a problem. Science is science, and but we'll try to help you as far as we can, and we're discussing the science right now on this. If you look at the news item on the paper on our website, there you can just quickly make a request to get the paper, and if you make that request, we send out to you. So we will, we really encourage you to do so. You just go right into the Resilience Center page. You'll find the latest summary of the paper, and there you have a box to get it sent to you. So Elke, Planetary Boundaries Framework 2.0 course. Will you offer continuation of this excellent course regarding forthcoming changes and updates? It would be very appreciated to continue our communication information exchange on this platform in 2015. But you'd like to start?
Definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll give this course again on this platform. We don't know exactly when yet. It's not even finished yet, but we will definitely give it again. So don't worry, and keep looking at our homepage, looking at the SDSN site as soon as we've decided the dates that'll work well, because there's a lot of other courses coming up on this site, then it'll be put on there right away. But if you have any questions that you want to ask specifically about this course, don't hesitate to contact me.
And just to share with you, I had a chat with Jeff Sachs just a few days ago. He's absolutely thrilled by this course. We are together going to continue investing in the SDSN EDU. In fact, the vision is for this to become even more prominent and with larger educational portfolio, and in particular to take the step where it should be, I hope soon, possible for you guys to choose whether you want to go the course in this informal way, or whether you'd like to enroll and follow the course as an accredited academic course at the university close to where you live, so that we have a network of universities across the world that actually approve of this course within their academic procedure. It wasn't possible to do it for this course because we needed first to show what we had, but now we can actually process this course through universities in everything from Argentina to India, and certainly Stockholm University as well. And then you can enroll and follow the course, and what would happen then is that you have an examination and supervision occurring locally, but you then join all the lectures and quizzes and chats just as we've done now as a global course. So it becomes a downscaling in a way also of the course content. And we will be working very hard to succeed in that. Several universities, actually university professors are among you who have been following the course and have expressed exactly this interest in processing the course at local universities, and we will be so excited of doing that. It would be absolutely fantastic to give this course 10, 15 universities plus the open access as we've had now. Also, remember that we'd love to do what you suggested, Elke, to keep the dialogue going. Let's explore that. And secondly, all the material remains open until, Andrew?
The 2nd of February.
Okay.
So the first week of February right now, this course is still open. So you can new people can still log in and still look, even if you just want to just look at some of the lectures. We encourage grazing or browsing, as you say, as well. Just look and see whatever you are interested in. Focus your energy there.
Mm. Okay, so dear friends, time passes quickly when you're having a nice time. So we're at the end of this chat. I'd just like to round off where one of the questions kicked off, in fact, that yes, 2015 is really potentially the most decisive year for global sustainable development in the history of modern civilization. It's remarkable that heads of state will be meeting not once but twice to decide, the
the pathway for world development over at least the next 5-10 years. As I hope you felt during this course, the next 5-10 years are decisive if we're going to transform ourselves away from too large global environmental risks. So it's really a very decisive year. We will, from the Resilience Center side, actively work from Davos to the World Expo in Milan to the Finance Summit in Addis. We will be deeply engaged in the Climate Science Congress in July in Paris, towards the SDG General Assembly weeks in September, all the way up to the Climate Summit in December. So it's a really exciting year. We have a lot of science and an engagement in the pipeline. We're releasing a book next week, which is an update of the Human Quest book that I wrote with Matthias Klum, National Geographic photographer, a few years back. We've done an update and a kind of a pocket version of that, and I hope we'll be able to share that with you, but keep an eye open for that. It's called Big World, Small Planet, Abundance Within Planetary Boundaries. We'll have a sneak release of that in Davos. So there's a lot of exciting work going on, and again, we'd love that you not become, that's wrong, you are ambassadors for this new thinking. You are at the cutting edge of understanding both the human predicament in the Anthropocene, but also the opportunities in a transformation towards development within a safe operating space. So, believe me, you are at the absolute front end of understanding the challenges and opportunities for humanity. So be stewards of that knowledge wherever you can, because that will contribute in a significant way, I'm convinced, of us becoming wise stewards of the biosphere for our own development. So again, thank you so much. It's been an enormous learning journey for us. It's been exciting. We've had great fun, and it's all thanks to you. Thanks to these engagements, which are filling up a lot of intellectual energy and spur to continue our joint endeavors in the future. So again, thanks a lot. And Lisa, final word to you.
One thing I know that you'll be doing too is we're going to be choosing the people that have finished and are excellent students, and you'll be signing books pretty soon. That's right. We'll be sending them, actually, those of you that have earned it in one way or another, either by doing an excellent job in the course or by doing your fantastic 2-minute videos that we are also really, really looking forward to seeing. Like we said, you don't have to be in it if you find that uncomfortable. Film somebody else, film something else, but I can't wait to see, hopefully maybe hundreds of really cool 2-minute videos that we are challenged you to do, and we will put it up on our homepage and we'll put it out there, and then so that's something that can get you up into this pool to get your own copy of the Human Quest as well, signed by Johan. So yeah, this has been a really cool learning experience for me. Really exciting. Really happy to see all the new ideas and innovation, and now to see even the interest on the education side of taking this course forward in your own way. So thanks a lot for the opportunity to do this course with you guys.
Okay, so have a great weekend wherever you are in the world. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.